Seminars 2015 is the rack and pinion. So as you turn the pinion back and forth, the rack moves back and forth, easy as pie. It's so much nicer than a box, you know, with a worm gear, like a T-type, or a big Healy, or the earlier Jags. Out on the end, you've got the inner tie rod, and this comes apart and is adjustable on the MGAs and the T-types. It's not easily adjustable at all, but this has got a, and I don't know if I can get that out of there or not. We've got this button, and inside the button, down in here, there's a spring. Let's see that the spring, we stolen the spring because the springs break. So this is under some spring tension, and when you go to adjust this, if you have it apart, you tighten this guy up, and then there's a locking collar that also moves, and you can tighten that up against the outside. You want to ensure that you have full articulation, and this guy's got to be free to turn and to move about, because if you get him too tight, he'll jam up. But you know, as you go around corners and everything, you have to make sure that it's going to move freely. This guy doesn't, because that button's kind of jammed in there. But when the wheel goes up and down, the rack obviously is fixed. But as your suspension moves up and down, or more correctly, the suspension fixed, and when this moves up and down with the car, this has to be able to move. So the rack has got oil in it, and that oil is held in place. There's a cap on the bottom that covers the pinion, and then there's an adjuster cap here on the top. And underneath that lies a plunger, and there's some shims, which I don't have examples of here. And to service this, you take the cap off the top, which on a B is really easy. It's just two half-inch headed bolts. You take that off, there's a plunger in there, you take him out, and you drool 90 weight gear oil down inside while your associate turns the rack and pinion back and forth. And when you get enough oil in there, then whatever's extra will burp back out as you eventually get to a point where it's burping out as much as you're trying to get in. And at that point you can stop trying to fill it, because it isn't going to take any more. I was looking on MG Experience, and some guy says, oh, it's just such a crude way of doing it, and I measure out the oil and put it all in and everything. But we're in a combat situation here where you have to do this stuff relatively quickly, and it is a messy job. If you got your friend up here turning it and you're dumping oil into here, eventually it's going to burp out and it's going to get on the floor. So either you can do it really, really slowly, or you can just do it for real and clean up the mess afterwards. Underneath this cap, which goes on the top, lies some shims, and those shims determine how much the rack is pressed onto the pinion. Over a period of time, it's all worn out. So you want to take out, anytime you service the rack, you want to take out the thinnest shim. On a T-type, and on yours, it's a big nut on top of there, but it's the same thing. It isn't a nice, easy plate. It's difficult to get to in the TF, but you can loosen it, and you get underneath there, put the 90 weight in, and fill up just the same way. But still, you got shims, little brass shims there. You're going to drop those shims out, and you're going to put this guy back in, and if you take out too many shims, the steering gets tight. You cannot have tight steering, absolutely. Your steering's got to always be nice and feather light, but you don't want the steering wheel to turn like this without anything happening. you know, that's the nice thing about rack and pinions. It's always so nice and tight. The earlier TCs and the Healey's, early Jags, they've got those steering boxes on them, and geez, a TC, you can't even steer a TC, you just aim it, you know? And you hope that it's got incredible caster, and you just hope it'll track straight down the road. That's, you know, those the motorcycles you see with the front wheel half a mile out in front of the car. That guy can stand up and turn around on his bike, and it'll still keep going down the road because the caster is so incredible. So the more caster there is, the more it wants to stay ahead. On the other hand, the more caster there is, the harder the steering is, because as you turn the steering wheel left and right, the car actually rises and falls as it goes through the pivot point. So when they came out with the MGBs, it had a certain amount of caster. It's a couple degrees of caster. And with bias ply tires, you needed that caster. But with radial tires, you don't need the caster. So there are some anti-caster shims that you can buy to put into an MGB now that change the position of the front cross member forward just a little bit, so it brings the caster a little more vertically. So the steering is made made easier. But when you put those in, you have to loosen up the rack and shim the rack, because this is part of the front cross member, and the steering column up here is fixed, and all the steering has to go through the steering U-joint. And if the steering U-joint, if the centers of the pinion and the steering column don't meet, if they're offset somehow, then your steering is real easy and then real hard and real easy and real hard. And that also can be, this is the steering U-joints. So this one is pretty horrible. It pivots on this axis, but it doesn't pivot on that axis. And it's really hard sometimes to tell. This guy doesn't pivot at all. It's just rusted. So you can imagine trying to steer with something like that. I mean, you've got a big mechanical advantage up here, especially with the older cars, the big wheels. Bigger the wheel, the easier the steering is. The MGC uses a rubber mount to help isolate the wheel from the road.
Don't these have grease?
No. You can't. Now, some of the new ones you buy, the U-joint that goes into them, it's got a grease zerk, and you can. But sometimes it's a little oil on them. Well, there's no substitute to flooding everything with grease and oil. I mean, that makes everything but the electricals work better. So the rack and pinion again takes hypoid gear oils, same stuff you'd use in the differential.
Are there any grass pieces in there that you got to worry about?
No, yes, there is. The plunger. The plunger, yes.
So you've got to use GL1 or GL4 it is. So
you can't use GL5.
Right.
Now because when you're steering, I mean 99.99% of the time you're running straight down the road. So all the wear that's going to happen on the rack from that plunger being on it is going to happen right where you're going down the road. And you can see with this guy, see all the wear is here. Yeah. So on this one, no matter what you do, you're going to end up, it's going to end up being crappy steering, because if you get it so that it feels nice in the middle, when you go out to the edge, when you go out to spin it around to one way or the other, it's going to all but lock up. You cannot have tight steering, ever. I mean, when you take your hand off the wheels have to snap back. If they don't, you don't want to have to walk it around the corner. That's dangerous. So our machine shop, turns out, we've been sending these racks out to the machine shop, and they chuck it up in their mill and they skim it and they make it nice and smooth again, so we can restore the rack and have a nice even movement left and right. So if it hasn't been oiled in a long time, well, I'll pass this around. You can see the teeth, the teeth on the pinion, you know, can get real rusty. It's not uncommon to find dirt inside the rack. I mean, the boots exist to keep the oil in and to keep the dirt out. So when the boots have torn, you're not getting any lubrication, and you're allowing this other stuff in. So I want to encourage everyone to come to our technical seminars from time to time. We have them every year. This year, February 2015, we had an X-Pag engine rebuild. That took 2 days. We started it up on the bench. That was a lot of fun. This is our weekend seminar where we're going over a complete lube and a complete tune, and Lucas Electrics. This next weekend we've got tuning for speed, how to make your car go faster with all kinds of exciting parts. And then we have our carburetor workshop this year where you bring your carburetor and rebuild it. We tell you what to do, and you do it, and you take them home, and they're going to work a whole lot better than they did to begin with. Maybe next year we'll have another gearbox seminar. So check in with us. Watch our website. Come to University Motors. And I don't want to sound like Starvin' Marvin, but stop. I need your business. Safety fast.